Merry Christmas Eve to you.
Merry Christmas Eve.
And Merry Christmas Eve to anybody watching / listening at the moment. Have you gotten your shopping done?
Yes, I have.
You what?
Yes, I
You
have.
have? How many gifts will be given out at your house this year if you had to estimate?
95% of all of them are for the baby. My wife and I don't really do gifts between each other anymore. We just kind of have stopped doing that. Like we'll do like little stocking things, but we don't do like big presents for each other.
So last year, before your son was born, it was just minimal gifts, or did you not even really do gifts for each other back then?
Last year we did gifts. We just decided like now that we have kids, we're just gonna keep it
sure.
pretty low key. Yeah.
It certainly changes you. I have so people are starting to trickle in, and I'm glad because I have this thing now recently where I like asking Brad questions just because it's funny to me. It's not they're not inappropriate questions, but I do think I like to try to get in that head of yours before we start a show. So I do have a couple more questions. I beg to differ. I think. Oh, did we lose you? You might have lost Bradley again. Let me. He will probably back out and come back in. This is not.
It is not a place.
You there? Sorry about the technical difficulties. There you go. Can you, Bradley? Now I see you. Okay, sorry. I don't know. I don't know if it was me or if it was you, but the screen froze and now you're back. Okay, so sorry about the troubles. Here's my first question to you. I like this one. This is good. If you had to delete every app on your phone except 3, which ones survive?
Google, the phone function.
I think you've talked about that before.
And my banking app.
So Google Chrome, the phone, and your banking app. Did I get that right?
Yeah, or Google /Safari and a web browser.
Yeah.
Phone,
just so you can
so I can pay bills and do stuff on my phone.
Okay, this is a good one. What's a hill you're absolutely willing to die on that has nothing to do with business?
What is a hill I'm absolutely willing to die on that has nothing to do
with business? I could tell you what yours is.
I have 2.
Okay.
Coffee is best black. And Steph is the greatest basketball player ever.
I knew you were going to mention the Steph one.
Those are my 2.
Yeah, I figured you'd mention the Steph one. What I was going to say is that the hill that you're willing to die on is that there was an ancient civilization that existed.
No, I'm not willing to. I'm not willing to die on that, but I think it's very interesting.
Okay, that's fair. And then I just have 2 more. Has in the last 5 to 10 years, have there been any impulsive purchases that you've made that you regret?
Not maybe that I regret. No.
Maybe not necessarily impulsive, but just purchases that you've made that you regret, just in general. Or is that? Also no?
Pretty much everything I've ever bought, I don't really care about. So, I mean, I just like stuff doesn't mean much to me.
So that ring that you bought Marissa, are you really going to tell me that you got to care?
No, that wasn't for me though.
Okay, so you're saying just for you. I got you. Okay.
Yeah. I will say though, my best purchases have usually been fairly impulsive.
Give an example.
Like we bought our waterfront property on an impulse, basically. I mean, there was a little more thought to it than that, but it was like, oh, this is a great deal. Let's just buy it.
I was going to say, I think you've told me before, where it was basically like you got wind that this land was going to be available and it was reasonably priced, and you're like, let's just do it. So when you bought that, had you originally planned to build, or was it just like, I just kind of want to own some land and see what happens?
No, we weren't going to build for like 30 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. My final question, then I promise we'll get on with the show. What is something that you are irrationally picky about?
What am I irrationally picky about?
Or just, extremely picky about?
Mm, Honestly, nothing.
So you're not like picky about, it's got to be a good coffee or it's got to be like really good ice cream. I don't want just any ice cream or nothing like that. No foods that you're picky about.
I am very picky that I'm not going to eat raw chicken. I'll put it that way.
There's a name for this. They eat raw chicken in Japan. It's very like exclusive, but I can't remember the name of it,
No.
but they do
Chicken
serve raw chicken.
sashimi is not something I'm ever
That's
doing.
is that yeah, it's something like that. I think it has its own
Oh,
specific name, but yeah. No,
no,
it's crazy. Okay.
no.
We're gonna move on with this show. The topic is genetics, and I added this last week. I wrote this down from our podcast last week because I was like, this is we were getting on the topic of genetics and like what it does for your weight loss and or what it doesn't do or how it impacts weight loss, how it impacts disease, and how it impacts your ability to build muscle and things like that. And so since we were talking about genetics, I just thought let's just dedicate its own show to specifically that. There's a lot to cover. We also know that, and one of the questions I asked you last week was straight up, do you feel like genetics is one of those fields where the more we learn, the more we realize, man, we don't really know anything? And you pretty much unequivocally said yes. And so I was like, let's just dive into this. I know you have some background in genetics. I know you didn't specialize in it, but you did do some genetics, so you can obviously talk about the things that you know about, but I thought it would make sense to, dive into all of that.
I read a book once. We'll just leave it at that. I read a book once.
So I think a good place to start is I don't well, I don't think we need to define genetics. Everyone kind of knows what we mean when we talk about that. But one of the things that we hear from people in our industry is I have bad genetics, or it's kind of like it's I don't want to say it's a crutch because I don't that's not how I'm trying to paint people like it, but it it becomes a belief that they have instilled in themselves as to why they can or excuse me why they can't do something. So I think obviously acknowledging that genetics they do play a role in a lot of things. They're not always an excuse, and it's not a for sure sentence. If you're if you have a certain gene, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to do XYZ or you're guaranteed to end up with such and such disease. But how much, and if you want to start somewhere else, by the way, just you can feel free to do that, take the reins. But this whole idea of I have bad genetics, kind of starting there, and just maybe we should clarify how much does genetics play a role when we talk about, oh, I have bad genes, my genetics are bad. How much truth is there to that? What do we mean by that? And like I said, if you want to start, if you want to start elsewhere, we can totally do that. But
there's a lot to unpack there, and the first thing is bad genetics for what?
well, a lot of people will say, in our industry, I can't lose weight, or I can't, because I have my genetics are like I'm fat. I have the fat gene, right? I'm paraphrasing, but it's that idea, right?
I think really when we look at genetics and the role it plays with health outcomes, there's a few perspectives to have. One is, okay, what am I going to do with this information? And two, how much does it actually influence your overall outcome? There's a distribution of like potential outcomes you can have with like your body and your overall health, right? On one end of the spectrum, there are the people who have amazing genetics and have the potential to have like Mr. Olympia level physiques. right? Arnold Schwarzenegger had great genetics. A lot of the professional bodybuilders have great genetics. They also put in a huge amount of work. So if you were to take two people who have very different genetics, one, is predisposed to building more muscle tissue, one is predisposed to having better muscle bellies, one is more predisposed to, having a leaner body composition at baseline, etc. And then one is the opposite and they do the exact same work. Yes, one's going to have a better outcome, but they're both going to have far better outcomes than the person with perfect genetics who doesn't do anything with it. The same thing can be said for like professional sports, right? LeBron is a great example. Perfect genetics for basketball. Like you could not ask for a better like genetic gift,
body
right?
type and athleticism. Yeah.
6'8", 250, apparently has the recovery capacity of Wolverine. But also like
vertical is insane.
Worked incredibly hard for a very long time. There's also people who have been given LeBron genetics who never even made it to the NBA. So the genetics are like the card you're dealt with your hand, but a large part of it comes down to how you play it. Right? I look at like the genetics I was given in my family, and my outcome is very different than most of the people in my family. Right? So a lot of it is genetics have a real influence on what your potential upper limit is or what your potential lower limit is, but they don't necessarily dictate your outcomes. So it's really important to understand that they kind of are the cards you're dealt, but how you play that hand matters a ton. And so I think that that is where it comes down to understanding environment and behaviors is incredibly important. Now, there are some exceptions, right? Some people are dealt with genetics that like you're going to have some sort of major health issue when you're really young and you just won't make it, right? There are these like monogenetic disorders, right? You have things like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis. Some cancers are like, very genetic in nature. So there's a lot of those things. But for the large portion of people, you may not have ideal genetics for a world-class athlete, but for most people, they don't really get in the way of having a good body composition and living an overall healthy life for a long period of time.
We know that a lot of genes are inherited, right? They're hereditary, they're passed on. I don't know if this question makes sense or not, or if this is even the way it works, but say you've passed on half of your genes to your son, right? And when he has kids someday, he's going to pass on a certain amount of genes to his kids and so on and so forth. How many generations before the genes that you were given to you by, the people before you, do they essentially wash out and you have, right? Like, so for example, if you had, okay, you're good at basketball. I've played you. You kicked my ass. Congratulations. But so
and the bet was you were supposed to buy me a drink if I won, and I still ended up picking up the tab. So we got to figure.
true,
Well, I don't know what's going on here. People should probably roast you in the comments over this, but whatever.
So you beat me in genetics. So you're good at basketball. But so okay. So then let's say, all right, that means that you developed yourself to be a good basketball player and pretty athletic, and so your son will probably inherit some of those athletic genes, but he got them from you. So like, how many generations until those traits that Brad passed on are no longer influencing the future generations, or does it not really work like that? Because I assume you must hold on to some traits, maybe
Yeah.
indefinitely.
Well, I think first, a trait like athleticism is the result of a lot of different genes, not just a single one, and a lot of like how you're raised and the things you do with your body.
And your environment, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But what's really interesting is the way genetics are passed down is not how you would think. So, for example, technically, our son should have 50% of my DNA and 50% of Marissa's DNA. And that means Marissa should have 50% of her mom and 50% of her
Right.
dad. And so our son should have 25% of the DNA from, his grandpa and 25% from his grandma. But that's not actually how it works, right?
Okay, and that's
your
kind of my
genetics
question.
is some of it's totally new genetics, some of it is old genetics, some of it is like they combined weird and you get new stuff. And so I think it's like the likelihood of you having genes from like 6 generations ago is like less than 2% or 5%. Like it's very small. Somebody just actually did a YouTube video. It's called the ancestors paradox. Like the likelihood of you having genes from 6-7 generations ago, which is really not that long, probably 150 years ago, is like close to zero.
Wow. Okay, so that
kind
of
crazy.
Yeah, that kind of answers what I'm thinking. So like only a handful of generations before you really don't have many of those traits anymore, or that those have kind of disappeared. One of the things I was reading is that I'm not going to be able to put it into the right words like a geneticist would, but is that your genes have human genes have patterns in them that suggest that millennia ago, or just throughout human evolution, that your genetics tried something evolutionarily and then abandoned them because it's like you realize, okay, I don't need these particular genes. So if you look at the human genome, it's one of the things that I was reading was that there's just a lot of evidence that the human body has kind of like gotten halfway toward an adaptation of something, and then it realizes actually that's not what I need in this environment. So like it abandons that evolutionary step and is no longer part of who we are. I don't know if that's making sense or not, but basically that your genetics show kind of like you can look at the rings of a tree and determine its age and where it came from, and you can determine a lot from that. You can there The idea is that you can determine a lot about human evolution through genetics as well.
Yeah, to your point though, I don't know if saying it abandoned it is the right like way to think about it. I think of more of there's not enough selection pressure to cause those genes to like be concentrated. So for example, let's say a million years ago, the first person born with blue eyes, right? If that gave them no advantage and only one of them was born and then they bred with a bunch of brown-eyed people, well, that would just lose, right?
Right.
The reason that genetic traits persist is there's selective pressure to make them more likely to be reproduced. So I think a lot of times we'll see these things that if they don't provide any real advantage for survival,
Right.
they don't end up in enough concentration to like make it to the next generations.
Okay, that makes total sense. Then that's definitely, I think, the better way to explain it. So I have two questions because there's another section I do want to another kind of topic I want to move on to, which is what genetics actually influence, and we'll get to that. But I have two questions I think you can answer. One is why are, let's just take brown eyes for example, or dark hair. Why are those traits dominant versus, for example, blue eyes or blonde hair? Like why are certain traits more genes dominant versus recessive?
Man, that's a good question. I think I think it varies from like trait to trait, but I think the way that like eye color works is so blue eyes are a lack of pigment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Brown eyes have a pigment, right? So if you have one person who doesn't produce a pigment and one person who does produce pigment, well, the pigment being there is going to change the color, right? You would have to have two people with no pigment,
right,
for the blue color to show through. So I think like every gene I would imagine is going to be fairly similar to that. Of sometimes it's just like a lack of protein or it's a lack of something, and so if you have one copy that produces it, the phenotype is different.
It's just how. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So then I guess the follow up to that is, so I have I have brown eyes, I have dark hair. My wife, blonde hair, blondish, kind of, I don't know, brown, let's call it. green eyes. My kids, they all came out blonde. Now that it's kind of turned brown for most of my kids now, and blue eyes. So
means you have blue eyes and you have a blue-eyed gene.
So that's what I was going to say. So I think that means big R, little r, correct? No, yeah, we're not going there. No, because they do look like me still. They still trust me. They're my kids. But to that point, is that suggests that I do have a recessive gene? Because if I had two, is it big R, little r? If I had two big R's, then then my kids wouldn't have a chance to come out blonde hair, blue eyes. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, so it's not quite that binary, but yes.
Of course. But basically, so somewhere in my genetic code, I have.
Which one of your parents has blue eyes?
That's the thing. Neither of them. But my aunt, my dad's sister, does have blue eyes. So I think it's that side of the family.
So then one of your grandparents has blue eyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so. But now, help me with the math here. Wouldn't that mean that each of my kids has a 50-50 chance of coming out either blonde or brown hair, and they just all happen to come out blonde? Was that actually a 50-50 chance?
I don't know. I'd have to look at it's not always that.
It's not always clear, like that. Okay.
Right? Because a lot of it comes down to genes recombine. So it's not like it's you get this copy and this copy. There's a lot of overlap, and I'd have to go back to my developmental biology stuff. But yeah.
Those are just a couple one-off, little curious questions in my head. All right, so what do genetics actually influence? Let's dive into that. Going from this belief we just talked about, from genetics are preventing me from losing weight, right? That's more of a belief than an actual fact. So let's switch to facts. Genetics can influence and do influence like signals, like appetite signals, your satiety response, stress and cortisol responses. I know that they can, it does have an impact on our energy expenditure, but there's this genetic sensitivity versus genetic limits and things that we actually, that genetics actually do have an influence. So what do they influence versus it's just a belief? Like what is it we know that these do influence, at least in terms of, as far as we should be concerned about losing weight, building muscle, getting healthier?
When you look at genetics and outcomes, it's really important to understand the distribution effect. And so here's an example. Well, and also the explanatory value a single gene or a single genetic marker has on anything. For most of our complex phenotypes, like height, weight, IQ, those things, they're all the result of a lot of different genes. And usually genetic variance explains less than 10% of the outcome, right? So that means when you look at your genetics, it has very little explanatory value for the actual outcome you have, right? There's many of the other things explain it better. Your family, right? And when I say that doesn't mean genetics. That means the environment you grow up in, right? What are the habits of your family? What do you guys do on a daily basis? What does your larger environment you live in look like? What are the habits and hobbies and things you've chosen to do with your life? Who are the people you associate with? Those determine 90% of the outcome. The other 10% is very small. The other thing to understand is the distribution effect of where people fall in things. So for example, there have been studies where we've kind of mapped the genes that are associated with things like obesity, right? We know which genes have a higher correlation. We know their explanatory value, et cetera. And those people fall on a distribution, right? If you have low genetic risk, low polygenic risk for obesity versus high polygenic risk for obesity, the like distribution of people who end up developing it on the low end and the high end, they overlap so much. So it still doesn't have a lot of explanatory value. And so it really comes down to what are the choices you make and how much more likely are you to succeed, right? Think about it like, okay, let's say you have the worst possible genetics for maintaining your body weight as you get older, right? Let's say you're genetically, you fall a standard deviation below what your basal metabolic rate should be for your height, weight, and age, right? Let's say you also fall a standard deviation below what your fat oxidation should be based on your genetics. Let's say you fall a standard deviation above for appetite, right? Let's say you have all of these things. Well, we know that all of those things combined still probably explain maybe 10 to 15, maybe 20% in the most extreme cases of like who ends up developing obesity or not. So even in those cases, it's still like all the other things have a much bigger influence. Now, you may find that it takes you a little bit longer to lose weight than somebody else, right? Or you may experience a little bit more hunger than somebody else on the same relative calorie deficit. So you may have, like, you may be trying to drive with your foot on the brake a little bit, but it's not like your emergency brake is on and your foot's all the way to the floor on the brake and you're not using any gas. Like, there may be a little bit of a tailwind, but there's not an unbelievable amount.
See, to me, what you're saying, and this is kind of where it's always made sense to me, is I think what you're suggesting is genetics is going to have a bigger influence on things like your hunger levels and your ability to like regulate your to regulate things like stress and your hunger levels. And that is what's going to drive you to either eat more or less, rather than genetics having an influence over how many true calories you can burn based on my height, weight, age, etc., relative to someone of the same height, weight, and age. Is that fair to say? Because it seems to me like genetics would play a larger role in influencing the things I mentioned first versus your actual energy expenditure abilities.
I would have to go look at the data, but I think they're probably all fairly similar in their effect.
Okay.
The thing is, you don't really have control over your basal metabolic rate. So you kind of just like ignore it, right? Your appetite, the food you eat, you do have control over, right?
Yeah,
so you may experience a little bit more hunger than the average person, but at the end of the day, that is something you have control over.
That's what I was just going to say, is you can control that for sure.
Like, let's take somebody who has genetically terrible appetite control and somebody who has amazing appetite control, right? The person with terrible appetite control probably is not going to be able to have a diet when they're trying to lose weight that's like the McDonald's diet where I have like one Big Mac a day because of the calories, right?
Yeah.
They're going to have to like really lean on food volume, lean protein. They're going to have to figure out ways to like get more total food, eat way less calorie dense foods, etc. And then you have other people who maybe genetically they just don't get that hungry. They may be able to have the, hey, I'm just going to diet on 1,200 calories a day from a Big Mac and a small fry and a Coke once a day, and I can lose weight, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not condoning that as the option to lose weight if you have good appetite control, because it's just not a good long-term strategy. But like, those are the things where you have to start thinking about, like, okay, this person maybe just has much poor appetite control. It doesn't mean you have to, they're not violating any law of physics. It's just, okay, we have to treat your strategy way differently than the other person.
Would you say you personally fall on more of the end of, I could do a Big Mac a day and a Coke and be fine because you don't get that hungry?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm more of that. I think also I've just developed the skill of, like, hunger is not an emergency.
It's exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's just a skill I've worked on. Part of it is because at one point I was so broke I could barely afford to eat, so I would go like, I'd skip lunch for weeks at a time because I just couldn't afford a third meal. So like, there's parts of that, right? But also I think like genetically, like my mom is very much like that. Like, she could not eat all day and then have like a bowl of popcorn for dinner and call it a day. My dad's the opposite, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was Oh, sorry, I should probably mute that. Was your family growing up? I mean, so was it basically a mix in your house of food available plus kind of more towards your mom's example?
You know what was interesting? We never like
Did you guys
restricted
do family
food in
dinners
our.
and stuff?
Yeah, we had dinner every night. Like that
Okay.
was kind of a non-negotiable. No matter what was going
Yeah.
on, you were home for dinner. Unless like
Hmm.
if I had a 5 p.m. basketball game that's like at dinner, I'd have to go
Sure. Yeah.
obviously, or I'd practice. But like we had dinner 95% of the nights growing up.
Yeah.
But we had like we kind of ate whatever we wanted whenever we wanted.
Hmm.
It wasn't restrictive. We kind of like just knew what was a good choice and a bad choice.
Yeah.
And my parents just kind of let us do whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
But I mean, dinner was always some sort of protein, a starch, and a veggie. Like that was just kind of, and that's how we eat now.
Good
Like pretty
balance. Yeah,
basic.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Is there going back to the actual genetics piece though? Are there ever like to your knowledge genetic anomalies that have shown like some people just can't lose weight?
Yes.
Hmm. What would that be?
They're usually genetic defects in some of the major appetite
Like,
regulatory
oh,
mechanisms. So like leptin resistance, um,
wouldn't have anything to do with your energy
Prader-Willi
pathways or anything like
syndrome.
that?
No, there's. Let me look. Um, uh,
Because
I'm
presumably
just
for
I'm
those
just looking this up
people,
because I don't know of any genetic disorders that lead to obesity that are tied to energy expenditure, with the exception of technically congenital leptin deficiency will reduce your like desire to move, but that's not basal metabolic rate. That's non-exercise activity.
can
Um,
hypothyroidism be genetic?
it
Or
can
is it
be,
often okay.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry, were you gonna read something? Maybe I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean the two major conditions that cause like uh, obesity as a direct result of genetics are things like leptin deficiency and Prader-Willi syndrome, and both of those, the bigger effect is on appetite. So they basically can't control their appetite, and they're
So that
usually like leptin deficiency is effectively cured by recombinant leptin. Like they just give you the hormone and it fixes it. It's sort of like if you have a thyroid issue and they give you the thyroid medication, it fixes it.
so the whole appetite regulation thing seems like it could become a self like a feedback loop where if you eat a lot of food and you gain a lot of weight, those signals like you could basically have, I don't know if the word I'm looking for is just like a your hunger feedback loop could be dysregulated to where the bigger you get, the more hungry you think you are, so you eat more, and it just keeps going. Is there truth to that? Like where if you lose a bunch of weight, or is it the opposite? Where if you lose a bunch of weight, now I'm hungrier than I ever was before because maybe I'm underweight, or like I guess my point is, depending on how much you weigh and how much weight you've lost or gained, that seems to have a pretty profound effect, or can have a profound effect on your hunger levels and your appetite, your ability to regulate your appetite. Fair to say?
That's fairly well documented, actually, right? The way that so leptin as a control mechanism for body adiposity is supposed to function like this. It's a hormone that's secreted by your fat tissue. When levels are low, it signals hunger and it
Eat more, right?
drives you to move less.
Hmm.
As you gain body adiposity, body fat, your body fat produces more leptin, which then should tell your body to eat less and move more to like maintain what the like fat balance in your body is.
Hmm.
But the problem that we see in humans in modern society is we develop leptin resistance as our body adiposity goes up.
Gotcha.
So we don't get the signal. So this is one of the reasons why we don't control our appetite even when we have chronic energy surpluses.
What's blocking the signal? Is it just the fat accumulation itself?
I think I'd have to go back and look at this because I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's primarily the result of inflammation
Mm-hmm.
and that impacting both peripheral tissue and your brain.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
super
actually one of
interesting.
the areas that Stefan Guillenet's work when he was working in a lab. He was
Mm-hmm.
focusing on like hypothalamic inflammation and leptin resistance in obesity.
Yeah, I think he touches on that in his book, which was really quite good. Yeah, that's super interesting. So I guess not to go off on a tangent here, but this begs another question. And we've done an episode on this. We've done two episodes on this actually. GLP-1s, they must kind of hijack
The
some of that
glippies.
and help, right? Like, is that kind of one of the things that they do? Is because we hear about, oh, it's I have less food noise. Is it doing something to our leptin,
I
that
don't think it's
signal?
doing something to our leptin directly. I think it's activating the circuits, the same circuitry in the brain, and it reduces hunger.
Hmm. We might
I
need to do
haven't spent
another.
a ton of time in like the hardcore neurobiology of like
Yeah, right.
what circuits is it affecting exactly, just because it gets so complicated. But I do know it
If you,
works in the same areas. Like we have a part of our brain that's really related to hunger, and there's like a bunch of neurons in there that all have these weird feedback loops. Leptin's involved. Apparently, GLP-1s are involved. Dopamine is involved. Like there's a whole lot of things that go on in there.
yeah, if you, I still think we should try to get Stefan on the show that because I bet he would know something about this. If you still have contact with him, you should try to get in touch with him and be like, hey, we should do an episode. Let's invite him on the show. I promise I won't play any ridiculous YouTube clips if he's on. So what, let me look at my notes here real quick because I did have a couple other questions that I had written down. Um, yeah, so actually, I think we've kind of covered a good majority of what I wanted to discuss, but I think, I think this is, it's such a deeply complex field, right? That I think we're still learning so much about it, and especially how it, when it comes to you trying to lose weight, trying to gain muscle. Like I think the overall, understanding is as complicated as genetics are, and as little as we know. What we do know for sure is you're better off just understanding that the environment you've built around you is going to give you a better shot at helping you accomplish your goals versus pinning it on I got certain genetics so I just can't do x y or z. It really has more what you've been saying throughout the show, what we've talked about is it has more to do with the environment that you've created and your habits and behaviors, right? Fair to say that has a lot more to do with the outcome of our lives as opposed to I'm just genetically predisposed to whatever.
Yeah, I mean, here's a sort of good example. Go look at Okay, so let's go back to genetics and outcomes. We talked about LeBron James having like the perfect genetics for the NBA. 6'8", 6'9", 250, had like a 40 something inch vertical, the recovery capacity of Wolverine, like everything you could imagine. Then you have a guy like TJ McConnell, 6'2", white kid, can't really jump. Like, yes, he's above average height, but like he has none of the
Elite
genetics
traits, right?
specifically to go play in the NBA. Um, but through like what he decided to focus on, what he spent his time doing, how hard he worked, like he is a legit NBA player. Or he developed the skills, he developed the tools, he learned the game, like all of those things. So two very different genetic profiles both end up with an outcome of they're playing at the most elite level in their sport. So a lot of it comes down to, is it going to be, are you going to let it define what your actions are going to do? Did you just go, I got dealt a bad hand, so I'm just not going to do anything.
Here's another personal question for you. You loved basketball. Well, I know you still love basketball, but you've told me before that as a teenager and kind of growing up, you loved the game, so you were obsessed with it. Do you think if you had made it your life goal to, I'm going to make it to the NBA, no matter what it takes, do you think you would have gotten there? Like, do you think you could have, or really you don't?
No.
Really, why do you say that? Like, no matter how hard you worked, you don't think you could have at least been like a bench player or practice squad or something?
No.
G League, huh? I guess I'm surprised to hear you
I
say
think
that.
for 3 major reasons. One, I didn't have the talent to play at that level.
In terms of, well, what kind of talent? Like shooting talent, dribbling,
I mean,
speed,
it would have
like
all of it.
okay.
All of it, right? There's so I'll come back to the second. Talent. I didn't know how to get like I didn't even know how to get to play college basketball, right? Like I didn't know how you get recruited. Like I just knew nothing, right? So you have to have a little bit of the knowledge too. Like I just didn't know what does that path look like. And then at that age, I although I worked hard, I didn't understand what it actually took, right? Because nobody broke down to me like here's what it takes to get to that level. And so at some point you reach an age where you're to go back to the talent thing. If I like let's say you take two 18-year-olds, one who's given a lot of talents and gifts and one who's just not, right? There's already that gap. Your chance like to be a rookie in the NBA is like maybe you have like 4 to 6 years from 18 to like make your debut as like a 22 to 24-year-old. There was almost no amount of work I could have done to make up that gap in that short period of time.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
Now, if I'd had 20 years, yeah, but then I would have been 38 and I could have given you 10 minutes on a Tuesday in November and that would have been it. Like, you know.
And I think nowadays, don't they pretty much when they're like before you go recruit a kid to college, like there's like recruiters going up to high school kids being like, hey, if you want to come play at our program, here's what you got to do, and kind of like giving you that path, which you're saying you didn't really have, but now the kids these days sort of do have that path. Is that correct to say?
Well, and I don't think every kid has that path, right?
No, of course not.
I think a lot of it comes down to just like, do you know how to get there? This goes back to weight loss. If when I was 14, someone had told me, hey, if you ever want to play college basketball and professionally overseas, you need to be in the gym an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. You need to get up this many shots a week. You need to be playing in these tournaments so you can get seen and recruited. You need to be doing these things. And then here's all the stuff that you don't need to do, right? Like here's all the superfluous stuff that just don't do it. And someone had given me the roadmap. That's like what we do with coaching, right? I think a lot of people when they think about like weight management, getting in shape, those things, they see all this stuff on the internet, but so much of it just is pointless.
Nice.
Right? It would be like me watching the And One mixtapes and back in 2000s and like I just went to the gym and did that stuff all the time and practiced it. Like that would never have gotten me on the court in a organized basketball game, right? But it's like, okay, go watch this film. You need to know how to offensively read if they're switching on a screen, if they're hedging on a screen, if they're flat showing on a screen. Here's the reads you make. Like those are things you need to learn. Like nutrition wise, exercise wise, it's like, okay, here's all the stuff that you don't need to spend your time doing, right? You don't need to work, like, don't go get your BMR measured. It doesn't matter, right? You don't need to be working out 7 days a week for 3.5 hours. You don't need to have this big of a calorie deficit. You don't need to be taking these supplements. You don't need to be doing all these crazy challenges. Here's what you need to do. You need to understand how many calories your body actually needs to lose weight. Here's a starting point. We're going to kind of test it. here are roughly the macronutrients you should be consuming. Here's the windows and flexibility you have. Here's how we're going to keep you accountable to doing this, and this is how long it's going to take. Here's how we're going to problem solve when you're on the fly, when you're traveling, when you're dealing with all these things. And here's the things that you're going to experience. Like, here's the mental ups and downs. Here's the scale ups and downs. Here's the community you need involved in. Like, it's kind of the same thing. And the nice thing is, with very rare exception, genetics don't really matter. They're going to matter in terms of whether you get to be Miss or Mr. Olympia, but they're not going to matter for optimizing your health, visually looking better, and being happy with your body.
They matter for your starting point, right? They matter for your starting point, and then where you go from there is.
They matter for your starting point and what your like ultimate and potential is.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I don't have the genetics to go be Mr. Olympia either. Like, I just don't. Right. When I was going through like puberty as a teenager, I saw all my friends go from like these scrawny little kids to like these super jacked kids with abs in like 2 years. That never happened to me. Right. Like, it took until I was in my mid 20s of like training for a long time. Like, I just didn't have those genetics, right?
Potential, sure.
But that doesn't mean I was like, oh, I'm just not going to do anything. It's like, no, you develop this over time.
Yeah. Do you think, I have one more genetics question for you before we wrap up the show. Do you think we'll get to a point, or maybe we already are, where humans are able to genetically modify other humans to our favor or to our, advantage?
From a technical standpoint or from a ethics legal standpoint? Because those are two very different questions.
Yeah, like from the technical ability to do it.
We are already doing that.
In what ways? That's okay. Interesting. How are we doing it right now?
In the gross misuse of scientific tools category, do you remember the Chinese scientist who edited the germline of those two twins when they were embryos
CRISPR twins?
Removed the CRISPR twins?
Yeah.
Removed the receptor that the AIDS virus binds to.
Yeah,
so we've done that. We
crazy.
Currently in a approved sanctioned use of this. We currently use this technology for people who have we've used it for some AIDS stuff, but we've also used it for cancers where we deplete your immune system, take your immune cells, edit them to be different, and then repopulate your body with those edited immune cells. We are doing things where we are taking your cells, re-engineering them into other cells, and retransplanting them. So we're already doing a lot of this stuff.
How? I guess, I'll have to look this up because...
Yeah, from like an ethics standpoint, it's always going to be very difficult to get any of these things approved for like editing your true phenotype.
And regular...
Like, I want to edit my eye color. I want to make sure my babies are... I'm editing all these things. Like, that's going to be a very difficult thing to get through.
So that's why you asked, like, we have the technical abilities to do it. It's just, it's an ethics thing as to whether we can.
We have the technical abilities to do a lot of it, but not all of it.
Yeah.
My joke is always, give me $20 billion in 20 years in a country that has no laws, and we'll definitely be able to clone humans. Now, whether that's the right thing to do or not, it's a totally different question. But we're not that far away from technologically being able to do that.
Yeah, I had to ask your question, or your answer made me curious, so I had to ask our AI friend here. Let me read this to you. This might interest you. So I basically said, I asked it the same question that I just asked you, and it said, short answer, yes, to a degree, but not in the sci-fi designer humans way most people imagine. Where we already are is we are already genetically modifying humans, just as you said, just in very narrow medical ways. CRISPR has been used in humans to treat sickle cell disease, treat beta thalassemia, don't know what that is, experimentally treat some cancers, like you'd mentioned. These edits are somatic, meaning they affect only the treated person, not their children. So you wouldn't be able to pass it on.
You've never seen X-rays of beta thalassemia? It's so cool.
Yeah, dude, I just saw one yesterday and the day before that. It's so common. No, I have no idea what the hell that is.
Just look it up. But, it's pretty cool. Okay. It's
what am I looking at? Inherited blood disorder where the body makes less hemoglobin. I'll have to read about this. It looks interesting.
Yeah, so I think what happened is you end up having more like free iron, I think, in your body, and so it like shows up on X-ray.
Oh, so Wolverine.
Yeah, except for adamantium was non-ferric metal, so no.
Is that what? Was it for sure? I thought it. I'm pretty sure. I mean, well, it was. Yeah, I guess it would be non-ferric, but it was definitely still showing up, and it would show up in an MRI because it's magnetic, right? So you'd still be able to tell. Like you could, if somebody has more iron in their blood. Well, I guess I don't know. I don't even know how that works. Whatever. Never mind. The rest of this, I wanted to read this real quick to you. What will almost certainly be possible within the next few decades? We will likely see disease prevention and resistance, lower risk for genetic disorders, reduced risk for diseases like certain cancers and heart disease, and possibly resistance to specific viruses. Repairing, not enhancing. So we'll get very good at turning bad genes off, repairing single gene defects, and editing cells like blood or immune cells. But where things get very hard very fast, complex traits aren't switches. Traits people usually want to enhance. Intelligence, athleticism, longevity, creativity are controlled by hundreds of thousands of genes, plus developmental timing, environment, nutrition, epigenetics. Changing one gene can help one trait and accidentally break three others. That's super interesting. Like if you modify one gene, you could totally mess up multiple others.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and again, to go back to this, just because let's say we could genetically alter these traits, it doesn't mean you're going to have different outcomes. Right?
Yeah, like,
here is,
for sure.
I'm just going to show you this, and there's like a lot of different graphs that show this. So like, let's just say IQ and income, right?
Yeah.
Here's an interesting graph. You can look at a lot of these, but they're basically the same. Okay. Well, that's Armed Forces qualifying test score, which is, I mean, it's kind of IQ, but let's say this one's probably better. I mean, look at this. We've got people who are certified geniuses who are making no money, and we have people who have very low IQs who are making tons of money. Right? Yes, like the trend line is this. So like the average genius makes more than the average below median IQ, but like that difference is not that much. That's like, I don't know, this is like 30,000 versus 40,000. But like, look at this. The amount of people who are making a ton of money, they're all over.
Fairly spread out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's the same thing you see in most traits.
Yeah. Can you share with us those
God, don't say it's Christmas. Don't ruin Christmas for everybody.
I'm not. It's the graphs that have nothing to do with each other. I can't remember what they call those.
Spurious correlations.
Is that what it is? Dude, that's so funny. You can't. There were a couple on there that were just like, they just cracked me up. I can't remember the names. I might have to look one up. But
the Nicolas Cage
popularity of the popularity of the first name Johnny correlates with burglaries in New Hampshire. Like what? The number of transportation security screeners in West Virginia correlates with Google searches for how to build a bunker. These are so funny. If anybody's listening, if you really want to laugh, Google spurious correlations, like Brad suggested. It's pretty damn funny. Cottage cheese consumption correlates with the popularity of the first name Andrea.
Now that checks out.
I just want to know who comes up with these and finds them and does the research and is like, yes, there's a correlation here.
I honestly think it's
That's so
crazy that grown adults eat cottage cheese.
It's not that bad. I mean, it's not. I would never be like,
Are
yeah,
you
I want some.
kidding me?
I mean, I've never. I can honestly say I've never been like, oh God, I want some
lumpy.
cottage cheese. But I like if
It's
I wouldn't.
lumpy.
It's not that bad.
It's lumpy.
There are grown-ups. Have you ever heard of Kazu Marzu? It
What?
is Kazu Marzu is an illegal underground sold cheese in Italy, where they take a cheese and they put it basically outside in like a shed and leave it for several months so that the flies get in it, lay their larvae, and then the larvae secrete.
Do you remember when you started talking and I said, "Don't ruin Christmas for everybody"? Now I'm just thinking all the cheese I eat over the next 2 days, which is going to be an insane amount of cheese, by the way. And now I'm going to think about flies laying eggs in there.
It's wild. I don't know why, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't really give me a hard time for saying I would eat cottage cheese when there are adults that eat rotten cheese. So it could get a lot
of adults who do crazy things.
Yeah, that's true. I have one final question for you that I'm hoping you're excited for, but you know what comes out tomorrow?
Nope.
What comes out tomorrow?
Stranger Things, Volume 2. You know what I have to watch though before I watch that?
What?
Die Hard.
Oh yeah,
it's not Christmas until Hans Gruber falls off the Nakatomi Plaza.
Shots fired at Nakatomi Plaza. Can I get your prediction on two things? And if you don't want to say anything, I understand. It's okay. Do you think someone will die in Stranger Things? And if so, who do you think? Do you want to give me a guess?
I think Jonathan is possible.
I think it might be Will, but that's just a guess.
Yeah, I mean he'll probably. I feel like that was fated from the start. You know who I will say though is like my favorite, most badass character in that whole show?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Who?
Hopper.
No.
What? Hopper's the man.
Nancy Wheeler is a G.
Winona. No. Oh no, I'm sorry. No, you're talking about. I'm sorry, Nancy. You said. I'm sorry. Yeah. Why do you say that about her?
Have you not watched the whole show?
Of course I have. But what makes you think? Like, why do you say that? There must be some specific reason.
She's the person who ends up like fighting all of the bad guys. She's like, okay, let me go get some guns and fight this guy. Hey, let me be the first person through the door. Hey, let me go grab an axe and just defend everybody.
Yeah, that's fair. But
she's like the tiniest person of all time, and she's just the biggest G in that whole show.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this wraps up. I'm excited. Anyways, that's all we got, folks. I hope everyone has an awesome Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate. I hope it's an awesome one for you. I hope you get.
We already passed Festivus.
Yes.
And we passed my favorite holiday, Saturnalia.
We did pass that too.
I know. Very sad.
We have
all the good holidays are gone.
I have another episode for us next week that I think we're gonna like. Should I reveal what that is, or should I wait?
Give the people what they want, Dylan.
We're gonna talk about agency, a term that Brad really likes. There's a lot to talk about. So if you don't know what we're talking about when we say agency, I guess you just have to
think of the Matrix and Agent Smith.
Yep. That's exactly it. Can we do an episode where we just go through movie quotes?
As long as we don't record it and publish it, yes.
Just stream it live, but don't actually record.
Yeah.
All right. I am just going to play this outro music. Don't tell my wife. I still have to go buy a gift, one more gift for her. I did buy her some pretty badass stuff, but I do need to get one more thing. So, and I think I have like 2 hours to do it before the store closes. So I gotta make sure I do that before this evening.
If anybody wants to know what it's like working with Dylan, here's a perfect example.
That's not true. I am not a. You have to admit, I'm not someone that waits till the last minute to get stuff done or that procrastinates with my work.
It was so funny though. Such a good opportunity to just give you a zinger.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll play this outro music. Thank you all for watching. Merry Christmas. Brad, are you guys, we open Christmas presents on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve? What do you guys do?
Usually Christmas Day.
Okay. Well, I hope you have an awesome Christmas. And I'm sure I'll reach out to you guys tomorrow to wish you all a Merry Christmas. But for now, I'm going to play this outro music. Like I said, we're going to get out of here. We will see you guys next week. So enjoy the music. We're outie.
Toodles.